team coverage continues at home and abroad with ABC News foreign correspondent Maggie Rulli on the ground in Ukraine, Inez de la Quatera in neighboring Poland, and also ABC News' Alex Brachet in Washington. Alex, let's start with you, and let's talk about what the president had to say, detailing what he is giving Ukraine within this aid package. What specifically stands out to you?
Oh, okay, Terry and Kira, we're talking about $800 million. That includes 800 Stinger anti-aircraft systems, a number of anti-armor systems, also drones for the Ukrainians, as well as shotguns, small arms, thousands of rounds of ammo and other supplies. But I think what's interesting about this, probably more so than anything, is the fact that the U.S. is giving detailed descriptions of the aid that they're giving to Ukraine, as one of our Pentagon reporters put out. Listen, this is something that is normally classified intelligence, and certainly for the number of weeks that reporters have been asking during some of these briefings at the DoD, they've been pretty caged about some of the support and the numbers of actual weaponry that they're sending to Ukraine. This is a very specific list. I think you can glean from this that it is a message from the White House to Russia just how well backed the Ukrainians are.
That $800 million will certainly come in handy. Let's go to Maggie Rulli in Lviv on the fighting itself. Clearly we've been talking for days about how the Russians have been stalled, and the Ukrainians astonishing the world really with the nimbleness and the lethality of their much smaller force being able to inflict so much damage. But let's talk about the big picture. Where does Russia look like it's making gains? What are the Ukrainians worried about? Let me put it that way.
Yeah, well, I think one big concern, and you and Kira just ran through at the top of the show, are those attacks on civilians. I mean, these are just horrific images and stories that we're hearing. We know Russia's advancing, trying to encircle the capital. We know they've been just having an onslaught against the eastern front and in the southern cities. But when you hear stories about attacking schools, indiscriminate shelling that takes out apartment blocks and complexes. We know just this morning there was another attack on an apartment building in Kyiv. There are allegations right now that we're still investigating about that attack on a theater in Mariupol where civilians were hiding, sheltering from the bombs. We've spoken with people that talk about shelling that happened on their homes. I mean, that is what's so concerning, Terry. People trying to flee, getting attacked. I mean, this is just horrible, horrible stories. And unfortunately, it seems just to be escalating. Despite both sides negotiating right now, Russia's sort of attack is just increasing on cities across the country.
And just briefly on that, obviously Vladimir Putin says his forces are doing everything they can to avoid civilian attacks, but at this point he's becoming almost Baghdad Bob-like. I'm not going to invade, I'm not going to invade, I'm not going to invade. We aren't attacking civilian force. But I do want to ask about one Ukrainian, the mayor of the occupied Ukrainian city of Melitopol. He was kidnapped last week, abducted. You could see that on the video. And now I guess there's news on him. Is he free?
Yeah, this is an incredible story, Terry. We've seen Russians targeting some of these high-profile voices within the resistance. Another major concern. This mayor, Ivan Fedorov, was kidnapped from Melitopol, a town that's been under siege now for days, if not weeks. And he was missing. We hadn't heard from him. Now, the Office of the President is saying in a special operation he was rescued. And what's incredible footage is watching President Zelenskyy speaking with this mayor over the phone. And you can see sort of President Zelenskyy smiling, saying, "We don't leave ours behind. We get our people." I mean, talk about just another motivating push from President Zelenskyy, showing people he's not going to quit on them, even when someone like this mayor has been kidnapped. A special operation, that optics of actually talking to the mayor in person. I mean, this is just some incredible news, Terry.
It really is.
And it's amazing to see what's happening around the world. He gets a standing ovation when he speaks to the Canadians. He gets a standing ovation today when he speaks to U.S. Congress. He still provides these videos standing out on the streets there in his, war-torn area. And then you've got all the refugees still, though, moving into Poland, Inez, even though Zelenskyy is doing everything he can to protect his homeland. You have millions of people having to flee. Now you've got President Biden saying, okay, in addition to military aid, we're also going to give humanitarian aid. What do you think the biggest need is right now as you are seeing these refugees continue to seek shelter as they cross the border?
Yeah, so the biggest need right now is for shelter and for housing. And in fact, nonprofit organizations and volunteers we're speaking with here on the ground say there's been a shift in the kinds of people crossing the border. So in the early days of this crisis, it was people from the north and from the east of the country who were traveling by train or by car, who had a little bit more resources and who were crossing the border and had a plan. They knew where they were going to go. They either had friends or relatives that they could stay with. Now we're seeing people with a lot less resources coming in. These organizations saying that oftentimes some of these people are even coming on foot. They're more vulnerable and they don't have friends or family members that they can stay with here in Poland or in other parts of Europe. So that is the concern here, where to put these refugees. And when you hear of cities or countries talking about being overwhelmed or being at near capacity, that's what they're talking about, that they don't have anywhere to put these refugees. So cities like Warsaw and Krakow here in Poland, we're starting to see images out of those cities of refugees sleeping on the floor at train stations because they have nowhere to go. The Czech Republic today saying they are nearing capacity. Same issue, nowhere to put these refugees. And they've actually asked the EU for funding for what they are calling humanitarian bases, but are really starting to sound like refugee camps.
The pace of this exodus, thank you, Inez, is just astonishing, almost unprecedented, and it's going to get even worse. Let's go back to Alex Prochet here in Washington. And Alex, that speech by President Zelenskyy, Kira was talking about him, about the kind of world figure that he's become. These are all professional politicians, right? They know a good politician when they see one, members of Congress. And that speech and the video, remember, he was a television producer in addition to a star, brought some members of Congress to tears. I just wonder your take on the impact of Zelenskyy as this figure that he is, this unlikely hero of the moment on our government, so riven by divisions, so consumed with trivial social media, Twitter mob issues, all of a sudden being addressed by this man at this time.
Well, Terry, I mean, I think you can certainly glean that Zelenskyy's forte is communication, right? I mean, that was something, whether it be the actual words of his address, talking, invoking the words of MLK, saying, I have a dream, well, I have a need, talking about 9/11, talking about Pearl Harbor, relating, as he did yesterday, to, what if what's happening in Kyiv and other parts of his country was happening in Vancouver in Canada, like how unimaginable that would be, drawing on some of the empathy that these politicians who are listening to his messages are giving to him and the citizens of Ukraine, and certainly that reverberated throughout that chamber today. You heard about lawmakers being in tears listening to his words, and then seeing that very powerful video at the very end, which ended with the message, "Close the skies over Ukraine." And even after this, certainly there have been two closed-door briefings, one already with House members, another with the Senate that's supposed to be getting underway, and they'll go and look at some of these additional requests that Zelenskyy has made and come up with a roadmap from that. But, we're hearing from a lot of members of Congress, mainly Republicans, that are already calling on the Biden administration to do more sanctions, as Zelenskyy said, figuring out ways where, if there are companies in some of these districts, to really kind of squeeze their relationships with Russia to make sure that Russia doesn't have any money to operate.
And that is part of this struggle to stop this war as well, a crucial part. Maggie, Inez, Alex, thanks very much.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.